Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. It's my pleasure to welcome you back to the fourth in the 2025 series of our Ramadan conversations. And today, we're going to be hearing from Imam Nojim Jimo. A brief about our protocol, as many of you already know. Please, let's remain quiet, and whatever questions that we have, even though we have a backlog of them, we'll try and attack many of them today. A very dear friend of mine has suggested that I don't do a summary today so that we have a bit more time for clearing the questions. It has met with my acceptance, and that's what I will do, to see that we clear as many of them as possible and not carry them to the next Ramadan. Let's be mute, let's be quiet, let's listen to what our speaker has to say. An issue regarding next week Sunday. If it pleases Allah, next week Sunday may be Eid, or Eid may be Monday. And we're contemplating having this lecture on Saturday at the same time, but no decision has been taken yet until we have firm confirmation from the speaker that is not otherwise engaged for that day, next week, Saturday. By the time we are getting to know whether Sunday is Eid or not, it might be too late to get around everybody. But we think Saturday will be safe, same time, 10 to 12. We're hoping that the speaker will be free, but we'll get back to you. So read the notice. It's not just for the platform, it's also for the time that may be taking place next week, exceptionally. Now to the speaker, Imam Nojim Jimo. He wears many caps. He's a political scientist and public policy analyst. He's a UK-trained chartered housing practitioner and fellow of the Chartered Institute of Housing. 15 years ago, he entered into the oil and gas space in an executive director capacity, rising in his company to be the chief operating officer. Imam Jimo started his study of Islam in the UK and spent 7 years acquiring knowledge under guidance of Sheikh Ibrahim Otuyo, a Saudi-appointed minister of religion posted to the UK. Imam Jimo is the chief imam of the Lighthouse Mosque in Lekki and National Naibul Amir of the Companion. He describes himself as a loud introvert and a quiet extrovert. Our dear Imam, trusting that you're on the platform already and ready to take off from where I'm leaving the platform in your care. Bismillah.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا إنه من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All praise is due to Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. All praise is due to Allah. Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. We thank him, we glorify him. We seek Allah's assistance and forgiveness, and we seek his continuing peace, blessings, and benedictions upon our noble Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, on members of his household, his companions, and all of us believers. Ibad Allah, having praised and thanked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a manner befitting only of him, I extend my appreciation to the Adeola's family for this wonderful yearly opportunity, especially for considering me worthy of being on this platform. Each year, I look at the array of scholars that are brought here, and each year I ask myself, on what basis am I here? I do not have an answer. May Allah continue to count these on the scale of the good deeds of the family, reward them here, and more importantly, reward them in the hereafter. And I extend that prayer to everyone who is part of us here today. Our topic of discussion, as already announced, is Islam Beyond Nigeria, the diary of an itinerant Imam. What I intend to do with this topic is share my knowledge of Islam as seen in different places and different countries that I have been to outside of the shores of Nigeria. I acknowledge that this is not a typical Islamic lecture topic, and I doubt if I would consider this topic a subject of discussion anywhere outside of this unique platform and this unique audience. Inshallah, I will be covering pedestrian topics such as salat timing in different countries, common practices in wudu in Europe, Jum'ah service, Eid prayers, and then on to touchy and potentially controversial subjects such as care of the elderly, i.e. care of the Muslim elderly in Western Europe and the Western Hemisphere as a whole, and even more controversial topic such as property ownership. I will, inshallah, give an eyewitness account on radicalism with September 11 in America in focus, as well as the July 7, 2005
We've lost you, Imam, if you can hear me.
bombings in now.
Yeah, we lost you briefly.
Okay.
Now you're back.
Am I back on now?
Yes, you're back. Thank you.
Okay. And if time allows, I will share my experience of 4 months in Dubai and then a little period in Abu Dhabi as well. And then I intend to conclude with how these experiences have shaped my Islam and my world view as a whole. So here we go. I was born and bred here in Lagos, and I had a unique experience of having the entirety of my education from primary school to master's level within the same local government in which I was born. I attended the best in the world, better than Oxford, better than Harvard even, and that is the unique University of Lagos, Greater Cockite. In my view then, as a teenager who had never stepped out of one local government, UNILAG was the biggest university in the world. What is the relevance of this, my UNILAG experience? It is that by the time I was starting university, the farthest place I had been to was Abeokuta, and I started university as a 20-year-old in 1983. The farthest place I had been to was Abeokuta, and going to Abeokuta was something which to my dad was more important than going to London, going to America, maybe even going for Hajj. But we had the annual ritual of going to Abeokuta for the Ileya festival. And no one could sing Ayinla Omowura better than me. I became active in the then MSS of the University of Lagos. And through MSS, I visited the University of Benin once for their MSS week, as was the practice amongst MSS students. So by the time I was graduating as a 23-year-old in 1986, Abeokuta and Benin were the only two places, in addition to the local government in which I was born, the only two places I had stepped foot on. And that was the extent of my geographical knowledge of the world. And that was the regimented life that we lived in the house of Baba Onimoto, as my family, as my father was known then. So total non-compromising discipline, the house of Baba Onimoto. But the story of going nowhere was to change a matter of 2 years after I left university. And this is where the narratives actually start. 37 years ago, precisely on January 20, 1989, I stepped out of the shores of Nigeria for the first time. I was 25 years old. That very unlikely and unusual journey took me to London, took me to Dubai, and took me to Hong Kong in China. What did I go to do? I was taken along by a business tycoon who was going to a wristwatch manufacturing factory in Hong Kong. So I was just a handbag to someone on that trip. But what a radical change of position for somebody who had only stepped his foot on one local government to visiting 2 continents in a matter of 2 years thereafter. We spent 5 days in Hong Kong in a place called Kowloon, which was and still is the capital of Hong Kong. And Hong Kong at that time was a British colony. Today it is part and parcel of China. A few things stood out for me from this visit to Hong Kong, of which I will share just 2 because of time. The first of the things that stood out for me was seeing skyscrapers for the first time, or seeing buildings that were actually qualified to be called skyscrapers. Hong Kong was and still is a city of skyscrapers. And relative to what I saw in Hong Kong in 1989, there were almost no buildings in Nigeria that were qualified to be called a skyscraper. Perhaps the 2 exceptions were the Nitel Tower in Marina and Cocoa House in Ibadan, neither of which I had seen anyway. In terms of Islam, which is our primary interest here, as a young person stepping out of Nigeria, indeed out of Yoruba land, for the first time, The times of the 5 daily prayers were both a revelation and a shock to me. I had been brought up to believe that Dhuhr, or what we
We've lost you again, if you can hear me.
called Aila then was at 2.
Okay. Please go on.
Okay. Someone is suggesting that perhaps I should switch off my video. Should I do that? Perhaps it would help, except that we rarely do that here.
Let's go on. Let's go on. We'll be letting you know when we lose you.
Okay.
Guess what? We might do that.
Okay. I'm also logged in on my mobile phone elsewhere. So if we go off again, I might just grab that and then be talking through my mobile phone. Now, it was in the winter that I visited Hong Kong in January 1989. And I was just describing my experience in terms of the Salat timing. Around 12, actually, the young me then, even though it was dark, the Nigerian head in me was still questioning whether I could actually do Maghrib, even as it was evidently dark, except that this Maghrib was coming 3-4 hours before the time that we will do. It was coming 2-3 hours before the time that we will do Maghrib here in Nigeria. So Salat timing became the first knowledge of Islam that I acquired outside Nigeria, i.e. that Dhuhr is not necessarily at 2 p.m. and Nasri is not necessarily at 4 p.m. I am aware that many on this platform have since traveled the world, and I'm not describing anything that is radical now or revolutionary to most people here now. But to the young me 37 years ago, that was something of an eye-opener. And I thought that was worthy of sharing. Now, my circumstances did not allow me to explore the city. I was not in control of my movement, but I got to know that a masjid existed in that city and had actually existed since 1849, meaning that Muslims have existed in China since the 19th century. This was something of a surprise to me. And that is it as far as on our way to Dubai and then to Hong Kong.
It seems to be getting worse. You may have to look for your phone now, or we'll find an alternative. You've gone completely.
I am not a.
Yes,
Okay.
I hear you now.
Am I? Okay. 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 I will just say I'll try through my laptop again, but I have my phone just nearby if I need it now. Okay. Can you hear me, sir? Everyone?
Can hear you.
Okay. Okay. So I was to settle in the UK, and I'm going to describe living as a Muslim in the UK. Allah says to us in Surah Al-Ma'idah, Quran chapter 5, verse 3, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. Meaning, this day I have perfected for you your faith, completed my favor upon you, and chosen for you Islam as your religion. As a young person who had only seen Islam from the prism of Nigeria, I immediately started to see some really strange, in some cases, weird Islamic practices upon arriving in the UK. These were things which, if you would ask an average scholar back home in Nigeria then, before the time that the world became one village, then you will be likely to get the fatwa that this which they do in the UK is haram. It's not known to Islam. The Prophet never did anything like this. Firstly, I saw in London, summertime, the exact opposite of what I had seen in Hong Kong in terms of prayer times. Fajr was at 3 a.m. Literally. Fajr was at 3 a.m. with the masajid establishing the Jama'ah at 3:30 a.m. summertime in London. Dhuhr was at 4 p.m. Whereas back home in Nigeria, we will be establishing Asri at 4 p.m. Dhuhr was at 4 p.m. UK summertime. Maghrib at 9 p.m. with Isha at a time approaching 11 p.m. What's going on here? Isn't Maghrib supposed to be 7 p.m.? As a young person that I was, these were revelations to me. And I'll tell you a story. This is a real life story narrated to me by one of my housemates then. The father of one of us, one of those that I met in the UK, visited the UK in summertime, and it was Ramadan. And then they started to fast from around 3:30 a.m. And then it was 7 p.m. And 7 p.m., for those of you who have been to London, is like our own 4 p.m. here in Nigeria. So the gentleman asked, when is this fasting going to end? And they told him it's going to end at 9:30 p.m. And Baba told his hosts, his children, that no, we break our fast at 7 o'clock in Nigeria. And once it was 7 o'clock, Baba broke his fast. Ibadallah, me to anyone who had never stepped out of Nigeria, who was visiting Europe for the first time, and it turned out to be summertime, the way Baba reacted was the way everyone was likely to react. What kind of fast is this that you start at 3:30 a.m. and by 9 p.m. you are still fasting? But this is where we begin to appreciate some of the laws of Allah, which Allah may not necessarily tell us that this is why I have made this legislation, but this is my law. Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ. Verse 185. Allah says that He intends ease for you. Allah says that He intends ease for us, and He does not intend hardship for us, right? This is a classic situation in which the old man could have taken advantage of his being a traveler and totally avoid fasting, and then when he will get back home, he will repay his fast. For Allah says in the same surah, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضٌ أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ, that whoever amongst you is ill and whoever amongst you is on a journey, let him leave the fast. And then when he is well, or when he completes his journey, then let him pay back what he would have missed of the fast. Now, with knowledge, this is what the visitor, that visitor then to the UK, this is what he would have done. Let's continue with Islam UK. I found that nearly every masjid was observing 2 Jum'ah on the same day. There will be the first Jum'ah, and then there will be the second Jum'ah in the same mosque. And as I talked to you in 2025, I just returned from the UK. I found that this practice is still very much ongoing, right? And again, if you ask a sheikh who has never been to the Western world, just narrate this situation to that person, that I found that they pray to Juma in the same masjid. The sheikh is likely to say this is haram. This is never known to anyone in Islam. No one practiced this before now. I appreciate that, again, some of you would have experienced this now through your traveling, but I am narrating a 1989 experience and I am building up to some other things. Another thing about the time that we lived in the UK, in all the years that we lived in the UK, we never once ate from our Ileya ram. You know how in Nigeria we will slaughter a layer ram and then we will eat from it and then give to people from it. But not once in the years that we lived in the UK. Indeed, we never saw our Ileya ram, let alone eating from our Ileya ram, right? And I wouldn't know if this has changed now, but that was the experience when we lived in the UK. And I will come back to why that is the case, inshallah. So as was the case with Juma, I found that 8 prayers, the first 8 that I did in the UK, I found that 8 prayers were done multiple times by the same Jama'ah. There will be the first 8 at 7 a.m., the second 8 at 8 a.m., then another at 9 and another at 10, depending how big the congregation is. Some congregation did 2-8, some did 3-8. Again, this was something that was unknown to me. And you begin to wonder, is this acceptable? Is this the same Islam that we are practicing? Again, I will come back to it. Finally, about the UK, I found almost from my first day inside the masjid that nearly everyone wiped over their socks when they are making wudu, and people really took off their socks to wash their feet. And to be honest, as at that time, I had never seen anything like that in Nigeria. Again, this is 1989 that I am describing to you. So it was a definite first for me that people were wiping over their arms, over their socks, rather than taking off their socks to wash their feet. So why were these things so different over there? And then are these practices Islamic? Firstly, on the issue of 2 Juma, it was simply because the masajid were generally very small and limited in terms of the number that they could take at a time. And unlike in Nigeria, where you just spread your mat on the road and then join the masjid, you couldn't do that in the UK for at least two reasons. Firstly, you'll be breaking the law by blocking the roads. You can't block the roads because you want to do Juma. Secondly, the cold of winter literally makes it impossible to pray outside. So scholars based over there came up with a local fatwa allowing two Juma. And that was how the idea of two Juma came. As I said at the beginning, if a foreign-based scholars were to have been told that in some places they observe two Juma on the same day, his response would be likely to describe it as something unknown to the religion, and as such, something that is not acceptable. The same explanation goes for the observance of 2, 3, or 4 Eid prayers, all on the same day and inside the masajid as well, led by different imams and attended by different congregations. I had a confirmation during my recent visit that this situation remains the same in England. On the issue of rams during Eid, remember I said I will never once ate from our Ileya ram in the UK. The simple reason is because slaughtering of rams at home is forbidden. You cannot slaughter rams at home. You can only slaughter a ram at the abattoir. Now, while the abattoir may be willing for a judge to deliver your rams to you at home, right? It would have been my wife and myself and our young children, nobody else that would have had to face this ram in terms of processing. So to all of us who have slaughtered Ileya rams in the past, you only have to imagine that it is only you and your wife that have to process that Ileya ram. Where do we start? How do we process an entire ram? So it ended up that we would just pay for this ram and have it donated. There is a charity that took them to outside of the country. Now, it is possible that things are different now in that perhaps the abattoir will process it for you as well and then deliver it to you at home. But during our time in the UK, no, we as a family would never once ate from our Ileya rams. On the issue of wiping over socks, which is no longer strange to us in Nigeria, right? No one will live in the winter of Europe except that they would embrace this practice. If you go to London in December, January, 9 out of 10 brothers you will see making wudu will wipe over their socks. I mean, of course, they would have done proper wudu before putting on the socks, and then they just continually wipe over their socks for the period that is allowed. About 2 years ago, one of our scholars here in Nigeria issued a local fatwa on Facebook, which I read on this issue of wiping over socks. And it was a fatwa that he was issuing regarding Nigerians living in Nigeria. And is a not necessarily Nigerians wiping over socks generally. And his conclusion was that it is not allowed. And he based his position on the fact that it was when it was the hoof, the black leather-ish kind of shoes that the Arabs used to wear, what they call hoof, that it was. Am I audible at all?
We can hear you. If we can't hear you, I'll let you know. Please go on.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the scholar based his fatwa on the fact that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companion, they wiped over hoof, not socks, and that the kind of socks that we wear today did not exist during their time. And on that basis, he came to the conclusion that no, it is not allowed to wipe over socks, that you could only wipe over hoof. right? And when I saw it, I only shook my head in agreement, because I have no doubt that if the same scholar were to live in Europe, his fatwa would be different. And you will see in Europe, African, Arab, Asian scholars of Islam, people who studied Islam in the home of Islam, in Mecca and in Medina, you find all of them wiping over socks. And I'm talking about the everyday socks that we wear. And this fatwa from this person in Nigeria just shows how our environment actually influences our belief of Islam as well. Our environment, our exposure, they all influence our fatwa for those who give fatwa, or generally our belief of Islam. Again, if the same scholar were to be living in Europe, I have no doubt that his fatwa would be different. That is that about the pedestrian stuff. Now I want to move to more controversial issues, i.e. care of the elderly in the Western world. Now, talking about stages of life, Allah in Surah Al-Hajj, Quran chapter 22, verse 5, a long ayat, Allah says, وَمِنْكُمْ مَنْ يُتَوَفَّى وَمِنْكُمْ مَنْ يُرَدُّ إِلَىٰ أَرْذَلِ الْأُمُرِ لِكَيْ لَا يَعْلَمَ مِنْ بَعْدِ عِلْمٍ شَيْئًا. Allah describing the different stages of life from conception, i.e. pregnancy, till we get old. Allah says, وَمِنْكُمْ مَنْ يُتَوَفَّى. Some of you will die young. وَمِنْكُمْ مَنْ, that some of you will then grow old. And some of you will grow so old that you will not know anything anymore after having known so much before. In Surah Yasin, Quran chapter 36, verse 68, Allah says, وَمَنْ نُعَمِّرُهُ نُنَقِّسْهُ فِي الْخَلْقِ. That whoever we grant long life, we decrease them in development, we decrease them in creation. أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ. Who do mankind reflect? So when people become very old, they become children again, and they become fully dependent. I believe that everyone here knows how to care for their elderly. And I also believe that everyone would like to care for their elderly in the best of manners. But how you provide that care is a major topic of interest in the Western world. In Western Europe, in America, you cannot care for the elderly, an elderly that is totally dependent. You cannot care for them at home. And it isn't that the law stops you from doing this, no, but the structure of the society simply makes it impossible. How does the elderly operate the heating system in the cold? How do they operate the boiler? Who stays at home to look after them? Which neighbor can you call upon to keep an eye on the house for you? These are the factors which make it possible. These are the factors which make it almost impossible to care for the elders at home. But then, those factors that we have in Nigeria, you bring in a normal dog, you bring in a carer, you bring in a nurse, bring in a relative, right? These do not exist in Europe. You may bring someone from Nigeria to come and look after your parents if they are living with you in Europe. But if that person is underage, you'll be lucky if you don't get into prison because of it. And if that person is a matured person, then you have to pay them the minimum wage. Otherwise, you'll be guilty almost of slavery. And there are not many amongst us who lived in Europe then, who are living in Europe now, who are able to do this. So how do you care for people in Europe? I was in my Arabic class with my Saudi scholar, and this subject of caring for the elderly came up, and we had cause to discuss this subject with regards to Europe. Now, this teacher, a Saudi citizen, has never been to the Western world before. And he kept going on about the Islamic prescription for looking after the elderly. And I was trying to let him know that in some parts of the world where Muslims also live, that it becomes almost impossible to be able to do this. But he didn't want to know at all. I kept asking, are they Muslims? Are they Muslims? If they are Muslims, they wouldn't put their elders in care homes, right? And he just went on about, are they Muslims? Stopping just short of saying that those people who put their elders in care home in the UK, Muslims, stopping just short of saying that they are not Muslims. And this is the reaction that, and it is possible that even of the people who are listening to me now, there will be those who will be of that view that I know, why would you put your elder in the care home? The truth is the situation of the people, Muslims, including Nigerian Muslims living in Europe, simply does not allow to be able to care after, and it is mainly because people do not stay at home. An elder that is permanently dependent, fully dependent, there is almost no way that you can care for them other than to put them in a care home. And I know this is something very, it's a very touchy something with us as Nigerians, as Yoruba Muslims as well. And I can understand. I got to know during my recent visit to the UK that the Asian community has found a way around it. And that is by 3 to 4 generations of the same family living in the same house, then people pulling resources together to buy a very big house such that 2 or 3 brothers with their wives or 2 or 3 sisters with their husbands will be living in the same house. And then their elderly parents will be in that same house. And then amongst them will be somebody who is going to stay permanently at home, who is going to look after that parents. But we do not live like that as a people. Myself and my brother and my second brother are very unlikely to buy a house and live in the same house with my wife, my brother's wife, and my second brother's wife. But I understand that the Asians live in this manner, and then you find up to 4 or 5 generations of them living in the same house. Again, the Nigerians, I know Nigerians that have reached 3 generations in the UK. I don't know of any Nigerian that is 4 or 5 generations in the UK. There are of our parents who went to the UKs in the 1950s and 60s and who are still there. Then they have their children who are my sort of age, and then they have their grandchildren. Yes, so you will find 3 generations of Nigerians, but I don't know of 4 or 5 generations. But the Asians have been there much sooner than us. And as such, it is communal to them to live in that kind of manner. I have not seen it myself, but someone described this to me, and it was in the course of preparing this lecture that I got to know that that happens as well. So perhaps the only choice open to us as Nigerians and Africans who don't want our parents in care home is to send them back to people here in Nigeria to look after them. But then, even that is not free of criticism, because you would then just have passed your responsibility to some other people. And then you are going to find people frown at this as well. Why would he send his or her parents away from where he is, where he can look after them? So, brothers and sisters, I call this part of the prices that we have to pay for living in the Western society, i.e., care of the elderly, right? But my advice to people is that those who have not lived in the Western world, that whenever this topic would come up, right, do not have opinions on these issues if you have not lived the lives that people who live in Europe and the Western world live. I do not think that those who live there are any less Muslims than we are. The society has just not given them the options, and you will be very likely to do the same if you are living in Europe. Those of you who are listening to me, if you are living in the UK today and you have with you your parents in their 90s, right, the chances that they would end up in a home is more than 90%. So it can be very easy to criticize when we are not in people's shoes, but when we are in their shoes, then our ideas, our thinking would also change. The society has just taken that option away from them. Recently, I started to think about the idea of a care home for Nigerians and Africans in general, a place where we can maybe give them a care that is similar or close to what obtains back home. I don't know if this is feasible at all, but this came into my thinking during my recent visit because we have now so many Nigerians in their late 70s and early 80s in Nigeria, and healthcare issues will come into it as well. And because these are our friends, these are our family members, we know where they live, we know the structure of their family. You just know that it is impossible for them to keep their elders at home. That very act of wanting to keep the elder at home may make them to fall foul of the law. And one of our friends narrated to me just last month in London that another of our friends brought his mom to the UK to care for her. And then because he works, he brought in a carer to be caring for the mother. But it soon dawned on him that it was not affordable. It was not affordable at all. And that over time, he was needing more money than he was earning to be able to care for his parents. And he had to send the same mother back home to Nigeria. These are the realities of the Muslims or people who live outside the shores of Nigeria. And I'm telling you, if you were to be living in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in the Arabia as a whole, and you are Nigerian, and you have your parents elderly, right? The situation is not likely to be different from the situation in Europe at all. I don't know if they have care homes in the Arab world. I wouldn't know. But as a person living in that part of the world, your parents will grow to an age that they would be dependent. Then if you're a person who works, how do you look after them? So it may not be something which only applies in the Western world. It may be something which applies away as soon as you move away from our society, our community, and our culture. I'll rest that there. Now I want to move to property ownership in the Western world. By far, the biggest long-term ethical issue that Muslims face in the Western world is property ownership. This is because you don't build a house in the Western world because they don't sell land. If you have never gone outside of Nigeria, your idea of owning a home will be that you buy a land and then you build your house. They don't sell land in the Western world. And I am actually of the view that one of the weirdest things that we do as a people is the idea of land belonging to some people. How? This is land that all of us came to meet. We did not create the land. We did not bring the land there. We did not do anything to make the land livable. And somehow, this land now belongs to some people or some family. It's a really weird thing, in my opinion. In the Western world, all land belongs to the government. Government is the only landlord. And again, they don't sell land. What they do is sell houses that they have already built, either built by the government or built by some other people. So, for Muslims living in that part of the world, property ownership is a major ethical issue because you buy a house and you are expected to pay for it over 20 to 25 years. And in the course of paying for it, you are going to pay interest because the mortgages come with interest. So the debate as to whether Muslims should aspire to own their homes or not was a daily affair in the 1990s and in the 2000s while we lived in the UK. And then Magic, the first Sharia compliant bank in the UK, the Islamic Bank of UK, IBB, emerged in the year 2004. Every Muslim was happy, and we thought solution was finally here. And then the reality dawned on us almost immediately. What was the reality? Whereas the conventional banks would demand a 5% deposit to buy your home on a 25-year mortgage, IBB demanded between 20 and 25%. On a typical £250,000 mortgage, then that was a deposit of between £50,000 and £62,500. No Muslim had this kind of money. Then the criticism and in some cases outright condemnation of the bank started, and very quickly this gained currency. The result of this is that everyone, and I'm talking about Muslims, everyone went back to the conventional banks. Mind you, the deposit is just one aspect of the issues. The overall cost of buying your home on the Sharia option is far, far, far more expensive than buying the same through the conventional routes. And there are all sorts of factors for this. Today, in the UK, there are over 20 banks, i.e. a combination of conventional banks offering Sharia compliant products, a combination of Sharia bank and conventional banks offering Sharia products. There are over 20 banks in the UK, more than the number in any other Western countries, including America. But the problem of deposit remains. The Sharia banks do not have the deposit or asset base to be able to offer products at the rates that the Muslims consider affordable. As such, this problem remains unsolved, the result of which is that a huge number of Muslims own their properties through the conventional interest-based routes. The biggest irony of this is that those who are renting because they want to preserve their faiths are the ones paying off the mortgages of the landlords who have bought the properties on a conventional mortgage, sometimes paying more in rents over a 25-year period than they would have paid to clear the mortgage. And actually, Muslims are sought after tenants in the UK for property investors. This is why his religion forbids him to buy a property because he has to pay interest. So he wants to live up to his religion. As such, he comes to rent your house. You, the landlord, you have bought that property on a 20-25-year mortgage. Maybe your repayment as the landlord is £1,500. Then this Muslim person comes, you rent it to him at £1,800. So the Muslim remains in that house, and then 20 years later is still there. He has paid off your mortgage for you. He has given you profits on that house, and yet that house still belongs to you, and you can tell him to leave at any time. So Muslims actually became the darlings of property investors because he's going to live there forever and is going to pay off your mortgage for you. Meanwhile, if he had bought that property himself, he would have paid less than he's paying you as a landlord, and 20-25 years later, he would have owned that home, no more rent to be paid, no more mortgages to be paid. So Muslims faced this dilemma in that you could have lived in that house 30 years and then the owner needs the house. So 30 years after, you are told, I'm sorry, I need this house, and then you find yourself needing to find a place to live. So this leads to our next topic, discussion on this subject, the emergence of the European Council for Fatwa and Research. Concerned about the lives of Muslims in Europe generally, especially in terms of how to live such lives without violating the laws of Allah. The Federation of Islamic Organizations in Europe came together and in 1997 formed a body of scholars to be known as the European Council for Fatwa and Research. The headquarters was in Dublin, Ireland. Now, it was a 35-member body, and by its charter, 25% as a minimum, 25% of those members must be from non-European of Western societies. These will be scholars who have never lived in Europe. So it is designed as an internal check mechanism for those of the scholars who live in Europe to make sure that their circumstances do not make them to issue fatwa, which will be in their interest. So they have a minimum scholars from the Arab world who have never lived in Europe as part of this European Council. And the last time I checked, it has members from Qatar, from Lebanon, from Ireland, from Saudi Arabia, from Sudan, from Tunisia, from Mauritania, Spain, etc. And it is made up of scholars of different persuasion. We have amongst them scholars that are labeled as Salafis, and scholars do not label themselves. It is we that label the scholars. We have amongst them scholars that are labeled as Salafis. We have amongst them scholars that are labeled as Ikhwan. We have amongst them scholars that are called Sufis or that belong to the Sufi order. So that is the European Council for Fatwa and Research. And in 1999, and please listen very carefully, in 1999, this Council of Scholars faced its litmus test. It was required to issue a fatwa on Muslim ownership of properties in Western Europe, bearing in mind that at that time, conventional mortgage was the only way by which you buy a property in Europe. Now, the starting point was not on whether Muslims could buy properties using the conventional mortgage or not. No, the starting point is should Muslims own properties in this part of the world? And then the answer to that is yes. Muslims should own properties. Muslims should desire to own properties. So we have a yes to that. And then how do they own properties? Because conventional mortgage is the only means by which Muslims will own property. And then this council passed a fatwa, which, as you would imagine, generated a lot of controversy. And I'm going to urge you who are listening to me to go online, search for European Council for Fatwa and Research. And then this fatwa was their fourth ordinary session in 1999. If you find the European Council for Fatwa and Research, then you will see Fatwa under it. And then the fourth ordinary session was where this fatwa, which is quite detailed. I'm going to give us just an outline of it. Don't base your position on the 2-minute presentation that I'll give on it. Make an effort, if it's of enough interest, to go and read the entire fatwa. It was quite comprehensive, right? And the fatwa was reached after people made different presentations, those for, those against, all of which are part of the fatwa. So in short, the fatwa was given in 1999, allowing Muslims in Europe to buy their homes based on the following conditions. 1, it must be the first home of the intending fatwa, i.e., if you already own a property, then this fatwa is not for you. It must be your first home. Number 2, the buyer must only buy what is enough for him and his family at that point in time. In other words, if a 2-bedroom flat is sufficient for you and family, then the fatwa allows you to only buy a 2-bedroom flat, not a 3-bedroom flat. Number 3, the fatwa given covers home ownership and home ownership only, not business. In other words, the commission is not given a fatwa to say you can deal with conventional banks for your business. They say this fatwa is only regarding home ownership. Number 4, the buyer, i.e. the Muslim, must come out of this usurious transaction as soon as an Islamic alternative becomes available. Remember, this is 1999 we are talking about. It was not until 2004 that the Islamic Bank of Britain emerged. So at the time in 1999 that this fatwa was being given, then the fatwa was that you must come out of the usurious option and embrace the Islamic option as soon as that option becomes available. And finally, it was explicit that this fatwa applies only to Muslims living in Europe, that we have not made this fatwa for Muslims living across the world. We have only made fatwa for people living in Europe. Those of you who have my WhatsApp number, if you send me a simple message, I'll send the full fatwa to you. Just a simple WhatsApp message. Please don't write on the Zoom, this is my number, send it to me. No, nobody collects numbers here. Those who know me, send me a simple WhatsApp. I'll send the full fatwa, the full link to you, and then you can do. Those who don't have my number, European Commission for Fatwa and Research. That is what you need. So as you would imagine, it attracted criticisms left, right, and center. And as I said, the Islamic Bank of Britain did not come into existence in 2004. So effectively, the emergence of the Islamic Bank of Britain in 2004 brought that fatwa to an end, because the fatwa was that as soon as there is an Islamic alternative, then this fatwa is no longer relevant. But then the Islamic alternative came, and it was not affordable to anyone. And I was in London last month and the month before, and I made inquiries from people, and sadly, the situation has not changed. I understand that up to 9 in 10 of Muslims who own property in Europe, in the UK, still own it through the conventional system, because the deposit level that the Islamic banks want, the Muslims simply do not have it. So much so that the same Islamic Bank of Britain has now been taken over by a bank from one of the Arab worlds. I cannot remember which one, but that is that. That was the fatwa. And one of the reasons why the Islamic option also became unattractive is that you pay a few dues twice. For instance, the Islamic bank buy the property and then resell to you. So there are dues to the government from the buying and selling of property that is paid at the time that the Islamic bank is buying it. And then when you buy it from the Islamic bank, now on the Islamic option, then those dues become payable to the government again. Meanwhile, the bank would have passed the original due to you as the person they are now selling to. So Muslims found themselves having to pay twice as well. So this, in addition to the deposit level, which is not affordable anyway, is another of the reasons why the Islamic options became unattractive to people. So, brothers and sisters, it's past 11 o'clock now, and I want to start drawing my conclusion. I want to end this talk on radicalism with particular reference to the 9/11 crisis. Now, I traveled to America in September 2001, first to New York and then to New Jersey. For those who know New York and New Jersey, it's like Lagos and Abeokuta, possibly even closer. So I traveled by road from New York to New Jersey, and then it was time to return to New York, and I made that return journey by train. The final train station in New York is the World Trade Center, the same World Trade Center that was brought down. So I traveled by train from New Jersey to New York, and I came down at the World Trade Center, and I spent 90 minutes at the World Trade Center. And I was looking at what was the tallest building in the world. This was on September 9, 2011. September 10, I arrived in London. September 11, I woke up and I saw aeroplanes entering these same buildings where I had been just 2 days earlier, and it felt like a dream. And who did this? Muslims, right? That is September 11. The London bombing of 2005, very briefly, I was living in and working in London during this period. And the station, my everyday station to work was bank station on the underground. That means Bank of England. That station is literally under the Bank of England, Central Bank of England. And I came out of the station, entered my office, the Guildhall, which is just 2 minutes walk away from the Bank of England. And then straight away, the emergency procedure was activated in the office. What was happening? There had been multiple bombings on the London underground system. There was massive terrorism, and London was shutting down. So all of us were told to immediately leave the office and start to go back home. There was no public transport anymore. The entire bus network had been shut down. The train system had been shut down as well. And I found myself, for those of you who know London, walking from Moorgate to Tower Bridge to the southern part of Tower Bridge. My wife met me there and then drove me home. Now, one of the bombs exploded at Aldgate Station, which was just 2 stops after my station. Then, meaning that I had a close shave, because the difference between the stations is just 1 minute or 2 minutes on the underground network. So what am I doing with this story, right? This was Islam to some people. Suicide bombings carried out by people with radical and extreme views, right? What else is common to both? The perpetrators, those who did the suicide bombing, actually believed that they were doing something to be proud of, and they were doing something praiseworthy as Muslims as well. And they believed that their action would guarantee them a place in paradise. One of the London bombers left a note to this effect as well, right? The equivalent of this in Nigeria is Boko Haram. So brothers and Islam, this is Islam as defined by some people. And to those with this view, you and I may not even be Muslims, the implications of which is that you and I may be legitimate targets in terms of losing our lives as well. And I saw a documentary recently about the London bombing, and one of the bombers left a video suicide note. And in doing that, he carried his 3-year-old daughter on his lap whilst recording a suicide note. And he was saying to the daughter that you will grow up to be proud of your father, and you will grow up knowing why your father needed to do this. So that is Islam to some people. And those people believe that you and I are not good enough. And I want to conclude it on my little time in Dubai. I was in Dubai for 4 months between October 2020 and January 2021. I remember I arrived in Dubai the very day that NSAS happened in Nigeria. I observed while in Dubai that in the entire 4 months, Juma khutbah was 7 minutes. It was never more than 7 minutes. Then after a while, I stopped going to the particular masjid. I went to another masjid, and it was still 7 minutes. And then I got to know that the same khutbah is actually delivered in the entire country every Friday, and that the government writes this khutbah every Thursday. It is released, and then people who are not imams, if they have the app, they could go online and read the khutbah that is going to be delivered tomorrow. You can read it today. And then I moved on to Abu Dhabi, and I found that the sound of the Adhan was so well synchronized that it was unlikely that it was a human being that was calling it. Then I got to know that it was machine that was calling this Adhan in the particular masjid. So I asked my friend, my host, and he told me that yes, it was a machine that calls the Adhan all the time. Again, that was a first for me. But then I found something even more weird in the same masjid. The same person who does the Iqama is the same person who led. Every single time I was there, he would do the Iqama and he would lead the prayer. And I asked my host, and he said in all the small masajid in Abu Dhabi, that the Imam is the Mu'adhin, is the one who will do the Iqama, is the one who will lead the prayer, and nobody else will do it. Again, that was something weird, strange, and this was as recently as 2021. So the summary of which is that the more you travel, the more you will see varieties of Islam, which some of which are unimaginable to you, some of which if people should describe to you, you will be likely to say, this is so. I mean, the same person, my host told me that the big masajid have mu'adhin and they have imams, but at the small masajid, the small mosque, the imam is also the mu'adhin. So I conclude on these 7 points, i.e., How have these different experiences shaped my Islam and understanding of the world? Firstly, whenever I would see something or a practice I consider strange, different, or unknown to me, and I'm talking about Islamic practices, I do not immediately assume that the people are wrong. And I had a very humble experience in London as well. You know, whenever you pray in any of the masajid run by people from South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, you'll find that they don't stand feet to feet, as we say, shoulder to shoulder, feet to feet, right? So I asked one of the imams that how come people that very clear gaps in the feet of people, and he told me that there is no hadith that says feet to feet, that the prophet only said shoulder to shoulder. And then getting back home, I asked my sheikh, who is a scholar of hadith, and he actually confirmed to me that there is no hadith that says feet to feet, it's shoulder to shoulder. Although he also added that, but we have example from how the prophet and the companions lined up behind the prophet, and that they lined up feet to feet and shoulder to shoulder. So to line up feet to feet is the correct position. And I want to give everybody here a little task, right? Next time you watch the prayer from the Haram, it may even be tonight when they are doing the Tarawih. You know, sometimes they will show the front row where all the imams stand behind the leading imam. Just watch their feet. You will find that they don't stand feet to feet in the Haram. Their feet do not touch. And just 2 days ago, somebody raised this issue, took a photograph of it and shared it on Facebook, and then asked one of our brothers who is knowledgeable that why is it that they don't stand feet to feet, and this is the front row, these are the imams, and the scholar responded that they don't believe in feet to feet, and this is inside the haram. Number two, all of us Muslims are products of our culture far more than we realize. There are many things we do because of our culture, but we would sometimes think that it is because of Islam that we do them. And one of the best examples that I give to people in this regard is the way we show respect to each other by putting titles before names. Alhaji Labadia, Alhaji Atamedu, Brother this, Mr. That, and stuff like that. I would say to people that it is because we are Yorubas rather than because we are Muslims necessarily than we do this. And what is the evidence of this, right? There are people here 5 years older than me, right? Here in Nigeria, especially in Yoruba time, in Yoruba land, it will never cross my head for 1 minute to call any one person like that by name. But if the same person that is 5, even 10 years older than me, if that person and myself were to be born in the UK and both of us are Muslims, right, I will call that person by his first name because that is the culture over there. Nobody puts Mr. in front of anybody. Nobody says sir to anybody over there. So that level of respect that we show is a product of our culture rather than necessarily because we are Muslims. And the same goes for greetings. In Yoruba land, we greet for everything. And that is why we greet for Ramadan, we greet for Salat, when we finish our Salat, Ramadan Karim, Ekumbe, Ramadan Mubarak, stuff like that. You'll find that in some other societies, they do not do all these greetings. And the simple reason is in their culture, in the UK, nobody greets for anything. All the this, that we do in Yoruba land, right? We've transferred them to our religion, and rightly so, in my opinion. That is a matter of opinion. But you will find that in some other cultures, nobody greets anyone, for anybody, for anything, other than the prescribed greeting. So our culture influences our religion far more than we know. Number three, just as you have in politics, you have far right and you have far left. So do we have in Islam as well. Who are those on the far right? All the suicide bombers, as in the case of 7/7 in London, or 9/11 in America. I'm aware that there is a lot of conspiracy theory around 9/11 in America, right? Those that you would find doing this, mind you, after 7/7 in London, there was a repeat on the 21st of the same month, but none of the bombs went off, and they were able to round up all the people who carried the bombs as well. So any potential conspiracy theory was immediately knocked out because the bombers were rounded up, right? So the bombers are the people who come from the far right of Islam, right? Those who do money rituals and use human parts, these are the ones who come from the far left of Islam. Look at the young man shoe bomber from Nigeria, Abdul Muttalib, was a very decent young man from highly respectable parents. You cannot fault his parents for how they raised him. The best education that money can buy, they gave to that young man, but he got involved with brothers from the far right of Islam, and they convinced him to hide a bomb in his shoe, convincing him that this will make him to be raised as a martyr, and this will grant him paradise, right? So who are those who convinced him to carry the bomb? They were Muslims. So these are the Muslims for me on the far right of Islam. We have Muslims on the far left. 3 more points and I am done, right? I think it's only 2 more points, right? Every person caught in this country using human part for money is from the far left of Islam. But where does the Prophet want us to belong? Ummatan wasatun. He wants us to be a community of the middle course. For me, the only normal people in this religion, that is a subjective statement. The normal people in this religion are those in that middle course. Those on the far right of Islam are abnormal people. Those on the far left of Islam, they are all abnormal people. And what is common to those on that far left, they are scholars. They display their wealth. They are generally, they would tend to be very wealthy, and they display this wealth, and then their followers, they see this wealth and they want to grow to become as wealthy as their far left scholars, and that is what ultimately leads to some of them to go this one. Final point that I want to make is that the religion allows more flexibility than some of us are willing to give, willing to take, or willing to tolerate. Without these flexibilities, Islam becomes very difficult for those who live in societies such as Western Europe. Take, for instance, the issue of one Juma. If only one Juma were to be observed, and that is what we know in Islam, then the number of people that will be completely disenfranchised as far as Juma is concerned in Western Europe will be huge. It means that once you miss that one Juma, then that is it. And the same would apply for it. So the religion allows more flexibility, belief, depending on where we find ourselves. Finally, I urge people to exercise caution when it comes to passing judgment on the religion of those who live in circumstances which some of us cannot even imagine, let alone experience. The world is bigger than Nigeria, and there are many simple things which we Nigerian Muslims take for granted, which are not even possible in other climes. A good example is the issue of slaughtering your Ileya rams at home. If you have only lived in Nigeria, you would not imagine that some world exists somewhere where people are not allowed to slaughter their Ileya ram. I rest my talk on this. Whatever I may have said, which is right, is from Allah and His Prophet, and that which I may have said, which is wrong, is from me and Shaitan. May Allah purify it for us. May Allah guide you and me to that which is acceptable to Him. May He guide you and me to that which is beneficial to us here and in the hereafter. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you very much. It's 11:26. We're hoping that you'll be done by 11 and we'll have a lot of room, but the topic itself did not permit you to do so. Thank you. Different flavor in the manner of delivery. But like I said, I've been advised to use the rest of our time, and rightly so, to cover some of the questions. But we'll start with your questions for you today. And I'll give them to you in batches of 5. Number 1, is it right to have one salam during Shafi and Witri prayers? Number 2, is it right to have 2 congregations simultaneously, one imam leading and another set starting their own elsewhere within the same mosque? Number 3, please educate us on the permissibility of Muslims working in Nigerian conventional banks or otherwise, where there are Islamic banks. I recently attended a lecture where the Ustaz discouraged Nigerian Muslims from working in conventional banks, regardless of the departments they are working. He asserted that they are all consuming riba, which is highly prohibited, and right thing is for them to look for work in the Islamic banks as soon as possible. Please advise on this. Number 4, what is the Islamic ruling on insurance? And are there any exceptions? And last in this batch, is someone physically fit allowed to ride the buggy or the wheelchair during tawaf on the higher floors at the haram? Those are the first set of 5. I mean, the part of the reasons why you are on this platform as you acquired is that beyond the subject matter of your presentation, the Ummah has so many questions, so many things they want to understand. And it's in our belief that you can assist where you know clearly, and where you don't know clearly, you can refer or assist us to find the answer. These are the first 5. And I also like to suggest that where the responses are short, we make them short so that we can ask you more questions in the last half hour that we have left. Thank you very much.
Can we do one salam in witri? Yes, that is allowed. Indeed, witri actually means odd. Shaf witri, the 2 and the 1. So a person may wish to combine the 3 rakah as one, not sitting at all for the second rakah, and only do salam at the end of it. And it's common, especially in Ramadan. Can we have 2 congregations simultaneously? No, that is not allowed. 2 congregations cannot take place at the same time inside the same masjid. Once there is a congregation established, all the people coming have to join that congregation, even if they have a different salat to pray from the one that is being led. You have to join that congregation, and hopefully you would know how to then maneuver and then finish your own salat. But 2 congregations cannot take place at the same time. Working in Nigerian banks. Number 1, last week I listened with a rapt attention to 2 weeks ago, Professor Ali Pantami, and his definition of the rural made a lot of, was of a big interest to me, right? I guess this is just a matter of your personal iman, right? But what I would always tell people, I say we focus on banks, right? But there are so many of us who do not work in banks, but who still deal with interest. If you work in the oil industry, and I'm talking about big time oil industry, right? There is no way interest will not come into what you do at some point. And that goes for many other industries like that. Indeed, I would say at my talks that anyone who runs a big business in this country of ours called Nigeria, if you run a big business today that I am talking to you, March 23rd, it is impossible to avoid interest in Nigeria. What is my definition of big business, right? If your turnover in a year is 500 million naira, you are running a small business in the scheme of things. Just assume that what you do is import cars, right? How many cars, how many Prados can you import with 500 million naira? Right? If one Prado is 50 million naira, right? Then the maximum you can import is 10 Prados, but you cannot even import 10 Prados because you have to leave money for clearing and some other things. So if you have a business which turnover is 500 million naira, you are running a small business. So all big businesses that meet my qualification of big business would at some point deal with interest or deal with the conventional banks in this country. We can only pray. And 2 weeks ago, Professor Pantami said that, and I hope I'm quoting him correctly, that to the extent that there is no alternative that can take care of that business of yours. And the Islamic banks that we have in this country today are not big enough. Even the company where I worked, right? If we are bringing in one cargo of, what's it called again? This one that is used in making loop, right? You are looking at averagely 7 billion naira. And that is just one cargo, right? How many Islamic banks in Nigeria can fund a 7 billion naira? And we would do this how many times? Sometimes 6, 7, 8, 10 times in a year, right? So I'm not a scholar who gives fatwa, and I'm not giving a fatwa on this. But if your iman is at that level, then avoid working in the bank, and Allah will reward you, compensate you for that iman. But it is not only in the bank that you have to avoid. There are so many businesses that you have to avoid working in, because you would find that so many other banks deal with conventional banks as well. Insurance. Insurance is not allowed in Islam, but there is an exception where the government makes it compulsory for you to have insurance. Then if it is the law of the land, then it becomes somebody is writing on land, Jais can handle this business. We'll come to that because we have sat down with Jais. I'm assuring you they cannot. But let's
Let's
not
just
get
focus on the
distracted.
question and leave Jais. Let's do, and don't respond to things on the platform out of context. Let us just go on as you are going. Thank you.
Islam ordinarily does not support insurance, but where it is the law of the land, then we have no choice but to have insurance. But alhamdulillah, we have a lot of Islamic options now, that takaful insurance, and you can go for that option if you are uncomfortable about the everyday insurance. Bogi and Tawaf, Bogi are there for people who need them, not for who just happens to have the money to afford them. If you are not very well, by all means, go for the buggy. If you are ill, go for the buggy. If you can do the tawaf walking, then it is more meritorious for you. So do it walking. Don't go for buggy just because you can afford to have the buggy. I would leave
Thank you.
it there.
Thank you very much. The next batch of 5. You said because slaughtering animals at home is forbidden in the UK, how will a Muslim living in the UK know that his ram has been slaughtered in accordance with the Quranic injunction of Quran 5, verse 3. Number 2, how do you reconcile the Afghanistan leaders on the rights of girls and women to education and self-reliance in their country? Number 3, Muslims working in hotel, what is the implication? Number 4, can I perform Shafi prayer after Isha, then leave with the witri till after my Tahajjud prayer? Number 5, I have children in the UK who couldn't go for mortgage due to the interest. But with your explanation now, can they go for a conventional route mortgage? Those are the next 5.
Okay. First one is slaughtering of animals. How do you know that they have slaughtered the animals? I probably should have added that the abattoir are run by Muslims, or there are abattoirs that are run by Muslims. So it is this Muslim abattoir that people pay to do the slaughtering for them. And on trust, they generally do what they are supposed to do. Afghanistan and girl education. Islam encourages education. Anything to the contrary is contrary to Islam. The women around the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, especially Aisha, radiallahu anha, they were teachers. Aisha was a teacher to men, and she was a teacher to women as well. So there is nothing in Islam which forbids girl education. Working in hotel. I think the answer that I gave regarding working in the bank applies to this as well. It is a matter of a personal iman, right? If you think that, no, in terms of my relationship with my Lord, I do not feel comfortable working in this place, then avoid working there. But just as I said, with regard to the bank, you will find that it is not just a hotel. Somebody asked me, who worked for an architectural firm, that if somebody brings a job to design a place for them that is going to be built as a hotel, should they, as an architectural firm, reject it? In my opinion, no. You are an architect. What that person wants to do is his business. He wants you to design something for you, and he has come to you because he knows that you are capable of doing the design. Personally, I wouldn't say to a client, we don't. Just as a person who deals in oil and gas, I wouldn't ask, this petrol that you are buying, are you going to use it in the hotel? Or somebody turns up and say, I have come from Sheraton Hotel, we want to buy diesel. Do I say, no, we don't sell to Sheraton Hotel? Where do we stop? So personal convictions is what I would say. Shafri, to do your shafri after Isha and then leave witri till later. Yes, if you are going to do tahajjud or qiyamul layl, because you cannot do a prayer of just 1 rakah. So there has to be 2 rakah minimum, and then you do your witri as 1 after that. That is allowed. And then the person asking about their children in the UK, should they go for conventional mortgage? As I said at the beginning, I'm not a scholar. It is scholars who issue fatwa. There are Islamic options in the UK now. If they can afford the deposit, then let them go for the Islamic option. If they cannot afford the deposit, then they have to live by their convictions. If they are convinced enough that this is wrong, then I advise that they avoid it. Those are those 5.
Thank you very much. We move on. The third batch. If we cannot operate 2 congregation prayer in the same masjid at the same time, let's say during Tarawih, and I'm yet to offer my Isha, how do I join the prayer? Very, very specific. Number 2, is it permissible to pray while seated due to fatigue or leg pain? If so, Is it recommended to sit on the floor or a chair? Number 3, can you give some clarification on Islamic mortgage and conventional mortgage? If there is no interest on Islamic mortgage, where do they get their profit from? Question number 4, does this mean health insurance is not allowed? Healthcare is very expensive. Number 5, is it permissible to distribute zakat in smaller amounts to accommodate multiple recipients who have requested assistance? Those are the 5 questions in batch 3.
Okay, so 2 congregations are not allowed. Meanwhile, somebody comes in who has not done Isha and Tarawih is going on. You will join the Tarawih, whatever number you meet till they do the Taslim. If it's 1 rakah, then that becomes the first rakah of your Isha. And then you get up and do the other 3 rakah on your own. If you met 2 rakah of Tarawih, then when they do the Taslim, you get up and conclude your 2 rakah, and then you rejoin the Tarawih again. But if you only met 1 rakah of Tarawih after rejoining them, because you cannot do a prayer in 1 rakah, when they do the Taslim, you rise and bring your 2nd rakah and then do your Taslim. I hope that is clear. Can you sit down due to fatigue? Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he came into the masjid once and he saw people holding on to ropes to keep them standing because they were in prayer, and this was a voluntary prayer. Was it the prophet or one of the companions? I can't remember. Someone like that. And then he asked, why are these people like this? And he said they are doing this so that they can remain standing. And he said, no. If you are tired, this is a voluntary prayer. Then leave it. It is not obligatory upon you. So by inference, right? If you are tired and it's an obligatory prayer, then go and take a rest. I'm not talking about those whose health demands that they sit. There are people whose health conditions demand that they sit through the prayers. This is okay, but not for somebody who is ordinarily healthy. It just happens to be fatigued right now. Then let the person rest and then do the prayer when he can be able to do so. Islamic mortgage versus conventional mortgage. That where do they get their profit from? This requires a long answer, right? Because Islamic mortgage has the way it operates that is different from conventional mortgage. And the Islamic banks make profits from the transaction they have with you rather than interest. You know, with a conventional bank, they will say your interest on this is 8%. And whatever happens, you are going to pay that 8%, right? Islamic banking will come to an agreement with you as to how their profit will be derived. For instance, they may buy the property for 1 million naira and they say, we are selling it to you at 1.25 million naira. This is how much you pay per month over this period. So what they are doing is making a profit rather than imposing an interest on you. Health insurance, is it allowed? No, in Islam, no, okay. Sorry, my head was processing life insurance rather than health insurance, right? Now, I had cause to ask our scholars, and indeed, I asked a scholar who actually did his PhD on something similar to this, and he said this answer will be given on a case-by-case or country-by-country basis. He said in Nigeria now, healthcare is virtually non-existent. The government knows this, and the government has said to secure your health, go and join one HMO or another. That is the line that the government has signposted because the government is unable to guarantee your health care. So he said in a place like Nigeria, where the government does not necessarily guarantee your health care, in a place like the UK, healthcare is guaranteed and it's free at all levels, especially for somebody like me that is over 60 years old. Everything is free. There will be no reason to go and take a private health insurance in a place like the UK. But as we are in Nigeria, and the question that I asked and the answer that I got is that to the extent that the government has said that go and take HMO, that it is allowed for us to take HMO in Nigeria that we live. And that answer was for Nigeria. Can we give zakat in small amounts? The answer is yes and no. The ideal situation in terms of giving zakat is to give that person an amount of money that can potentially change their situation for the better, hopefully by the following year. But then you only have to look at the level of poverty in our society and the number of people who are in need, right? So if you are going to give your entire zakat to one person to change their life, meanwhile, 49 other peoples are pulling your trousers, are drawing you, and some of them only need something now. Their own problem is food. Forget about changing their lives for the better. They don't have anything with which to break their fast. They don't have money to give to their children to go to school. So what do? Say, I'll give a big amount to this person? No. So the answer is yes and no. In our society, it is very difficult to give all your zakat to one person and hope that it makes a difference. I would say that by all means, yeah, share your zakat amongst all the people who are in need of your zakat, and Allah knows best. I've answered those 5.
Yes. Part 4. Can the lecturer please summarize how to observe the pillar of zakat? I think that's what we have just done, unless you feel the need to add more. Number 2, what is the difference between Qiyamul Layl and Tahajjud? Number 3, Islam advises us to be kind to our parents. Does it mean that I am not kind to my parents if I put them in a care home to be looked after? Number 4, is zakat payable on both the principal amount and accrued gains, or only on the gains? This question gets asked every year. It gets answered every year, but maybe this is a new person. Additionally, if the entire amount is invested, is it necessary to liquidate the investment or sell a portion of the shares to fulfill the zakat obligation? Now, those are the 4 questions left in the segment that you have presented. I can see another question coming in to make 5. Otherwise, we'll go straight into our outstanding questions over the last 2 weeks. And I can just make the 5th one. I have the 5th one. What is the relationship between our nerves and the angelic whispering and that of Shaitan? Is the nerves a separate entity on its own and acts of his own volition? Now, some of this question relates to the lecture given by Sheikh Bashir Umar about whispering. And I mean, It's just an outstanding question if you can take it. If you can't take it on, then we leave it to another time. Those are the 5 questions that we have now.
Okay, on the pillars of zakat, I don't have anything to add to what I've already said. I'm aware that some of the scholars take the view that you can pay your zakat on a monthly basis. I would leave such to such. I do not have the level of knowledge to actually be able to justify it. What's the difference between Qiyamul Layl and Tahajjud? All the prayers that we do at night, the voluntary prayers, collectively, they are called Qiyamul Layl. However, Tahajjud is that which you do after you had slept and then woke up. It is also Qiyamul Layl. Our Taraweeh is Qiyamul Layl. Our Tahajjud is Qiyamul Layl. And I'm actually quoting a scholar in this answer now, that when you sleep after Isha, and then you wake up to observe Qiyamul Layl, that which you do after you had slept and woken up is Tahajjud. Otherwise, all night prayers are Qiyamul Layl. So if I put my parents in a care home, does that mean I'm not kind to them? I have not said that at all. These are the dilemma that the people in Europe are faced with. And that option of caring for them at home has been taken away from them. So they are forced to put them in care homes. I have friends whose parents are in care homes in the UK as we speak, and they are of the best children that you could imagine from anywhere. But I also happen to know that their circumstances do not allow them to care for their parents at home. So putting, yeah, it is not our culture. By the way, it is gradually becoming our culture as well because children are leaving home in droves. The number of people on this platform whose children, entire children, are now out of Nigeria is frightening. What is going to happen when these people come into their 80s and their 90s? And we are beginning to have care homes develop in here as well. I know of a care home in Lekki Phase 2 built by Lagos State government. I've been there. I saw it and it has everything you could imagine to give an adult person in terms of comfort. Someone told me a few days ago that there is one in Yaba as well. I don't know. I have not seen that. So with children doing Japa and going to Europe in droves in some cases, the entire number of children in a family, what is going to happen when these people become old? And many of my friends are on this platform, and this applies to them as well. What is going to happen? So heaven knows how we are going to live our old age. But putting your person in a care home, depending on your circumstances, does not mean that you do not care. My father moved into my house. He was already over 100. And when we could no longer meet his needs in my house, he moved to my immediate younger brother's home. And it was in my immediate younger brother's home that he died. But that was because we were living and we are living in Nigeria. The same brother and myself, we actually both lived in the UK as well. Both of us returned home. If we were living in the UK, knowing the way we lived in the UK, it would have been impossible to have brought my dad into our home in the UK. So it does not mean that you are not kind as well. May Allah grant the ways out for us. Amen. Is zakat based only on gains? Now, when you do business or you collect salary or whatever, and then you have met all your responsibilities and you have money in savings, whatever is in savings over a year, that a year has gone round, is what zakat is due on. If it is business, right? Now, whatever you have that is capital and it is yours and you are using it at that point in time and a year has gone over it and that money is still yours, then zakat becomes due on it as well. If you have shares and then stocks, and a year has gone by, zakat is due on your shares and on your stocks as well. You may have to meet people who know how to do the calculations, because the average person who don't know how to do this. So zakat is due on what has been in savings or in reserve, whatever you call it, after a year period. It may be gain, it may be capital. The house in which you live, zakat is not due on it, but the one that you rent out, because that is a commercial transaction, now zakat becomes due based on calculation. What is the relationship between nafs and then whispering of shaitan? If I understand this question well, Allah has said in the Quran, and I'm trying to remember, inna nafsa la ammaratun bisu illa ma rahima rabbi. Now, that Allah has said that verily our nafs, that is our souls, or whatever it is you define it by, right, would always think evil, except who Allah has shown his mercy. And how does Allah show you his mercy? By you moving in the ways that make it easy for the mercy of Allah to be around you. All of us, our nafs would always suggest evil to us. If a man is in a room with a woman to whom is not a mahram, it is natural. Things are going to come into your head. And this happened even to prophets of Allah, right? How do you then remove yourself from your nerves suggesting evil to you? By immediately leaving that place where you are in isolation with that person. If you are a person in whose custody money is left, and you know that I can actually take this money without anyone knowing that I take this money, your soul, your nafs is going to suggest to you, take that money. But again, if you are a person of religion and you know that I am accountable to Allah, then that is how you pull yourself back. You know the story of Prophet Yusuf, alayhi salatu wasalam, when the lady, the wife of the minister, wanted him to do things with her, and then Aaron. I was listening to the tafsir of this story, and the tafsir is that Yusuf was so inclined to being human, but the righteousness in him immediately overtook him, and that was what made him to run, and then made the lady to pull him from the back. So what life we live is what then determines how we are able to remove ourselves. But our souls would always suggest evil to us. That is what Allah has said in the Quran. Inna nafsa la ammaratun bisu. Now, that's that.
Okay, it's 11:59, and we can only be grateful to you for the time you have spent with us, especially in both segments. The lecture itself was comprehensive, and you have answered questions that were posed to you, and questions that you didn't have any responsibility over in a way that a person of knowledge would. What is left is that we want you to pray for us, and we'll give you your right of exit once you have finished praying for us. Just before then, I want to let people who are on the platform know that I'm planning to engage the next speaker to find out about his availability on Thursday this week, 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock. If he says he's available, highly likely that we will move the lecture to Saturday, just in case Eid is Sunday, so that we don't get somebody to prepare for a long lecture, and then we anticipate, and then it's Eid, and then we have to go about our businesses thereafter. If it's not available, we'll find an alternative and advise you. That is what we will do. And if it is not Sunday and it's Monday, what have we lost by anticipating something that can create a force majeure? Thank you very much. Let's take the prayers from the Imam, and then we will end the session for today.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fih. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has granted us yet another opportunity to educate ourselves. We beseech him to let this count on our scales of good deeds, and we beseech him to accept it as part of the righteousness. We beseech him who has counted us amongst those who started this Ramadan to preserve us to witness the end of this Ramadan.
Amen.
We beseech him to let us have many more here on earth so that we can remain in servitude to him for a very long time to come. Allahumma rabbana la tuzigh qulubana ba'da idh hadaytana wa hab lana min ladunka rahmatan innaka antal wahhab.
Amen.
ربنا عليك توكلنا وإليك نبنا وإليك المصير. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. صلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه الأخيار وسلم تسليما كثيرا. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون. سلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب